Welcome to Will Talks. Today we have Tanya Palmer, all the way from New Zealand, in the Will Talks remote studio. And we are going to be talking about AI. We're going to be talking about early childhood education and how the country of New Zealand approaches early childhood education. We're talking to Tanya Palmer from an amazing company called the earlyedsolutions.com. That is a website that you should definitely go meet. And Tanya is also very active on LinkedIn. So if you want to learn about AI in preschool, if you want to learn about compliance training, if you want to learn about setup guidance and things like that for preschool and how the country of New Zealand is handling it, Tanya, I think, is going to be very, very helpful. Joining Tanya is Ria Willibrod, all the way from India. And Ria is an author. She's written books in phonics and science of reading, and she's taken workshops for parents. She's on Instagram, and she also spends a lot of time on LinkedIn as well. So you will get to know all of us over the next 1 hour as we talk. Welcome, Tanya. How are you feeling today? What time is it there?
Yes, thank you very much. It's 4:15 in the afternoon here.
Wonderful. And exactly which part of the world or which part of New Zealand are you in?
I reside just north of Auckland. Auckland is one of our main cities, and I live about half an hour away from Auckland in a beautiful place called Whangaparoa. And we're surrounded by 40 different beaches. We're extremely lucky where we are. So, yeah, it's a very special, beautiful place of the world.
So all those ads that we see about New Zealand being so beautiful and pristine, and is tell us a little bit more. Is it exactly the way we see it?
Yeah, it is. Especially the South Island is extremely pristine. I've been back up here for 3 years, but before then, I spent 9 years in Christchurch in the South Island, and the landscape looks totally different. So many mountains and a lot more remote, whereas in the North Island, it's a lot more built up and a lot more beaches. So, yeah, and quite different temperatures as well.
Incredible. One thing that as an Indian I heard about New Zealand, I want to share with you, is that when you walk into a New Zealand supermarket, it's not like the US or the UK where one product, let's say bread, in the US or the UK, you'll have 30 or 40 or 50 different companies of different types of bread. Whereas in New Zealand, it may not be that much variety because of the transportation cost, because of how far away it is. And only two, three, four, very few products come through. And so in my head, that probably makes me think like the products that make it to New Zealand must be really top quality. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think we've expanded a lot. When I was growing up here, there was definitely a lot less choice. But we've definitely expanded, but we definitely don't have 50 different types of bread. No, not at all. Nowhere near that level. Yeah, the food here is quite expensive, I guess, because we do live so far away from other parts of the world. We've spent some time in Southeast Asia recently, and we were gobsmacked at the price of food compared to New Zealand. Yeah, so yeah, it can be quite expensive to live in New Zealand.
And how do you think that would have probably impacted early childhood care in terms of maybe number of schools or type of schools or different curricula? Because in India, just to give you some context, we have 69 different boards of examination. So a board of examination is where the kids write a standardized test at the end of year 10. In India, it's year 10 and year 12. I'd like to know what it's also in your country. And based on the board, there are schools that are affiliating to these different boards, like the IB board or the Cambridge board. Like that, we have 69 in India. And based on the board, their curriculum is also that way, right? Because essentially, it's teaching to the test, really. Um, how is it how is it from where you're from in New Zealand?
Yeah, so in New Zealand, we have one standardized testing. It's NCEA. That's for our high school students. Primary school, so from from 5-year-olds to 12-year-olds have their own framework called the New Zealand curriculum. And then for our early childhood years, that's from 0 to 6. They follow a framework called Te Whāriki, and and so there's just one framework that everybody is to follow as such. So
This is beautiful. The last word that you said Te Whāriki. Does that spell Twariki?
yeah, TE, and then another separate word is WHARIKI. And so
Okay.
that's a reo word. So in New Zealand, we're a bicultural country. We speak English and we speak Te Reo, which is from Māori. And part of our education system is that we honour. It's called Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And so the whole education system is also based around that. Teachers are expected to increase their learning on that if they don't have it. When teachers study, it is also part of their learning. So yeah, quite different, really.
This, one small piece of information that you may find very interesting is about 20 years ago, there was a friend of mine, a lady who was in early years, and she traveled to New Zealand. And then when she came back to India, she started talking to more than 500 preschools, saying her curriculum is inspired by the Tarahiki,
Yeah, Te Whāriki.
Taferiki
Yeah,
curriculum. And we were like, what's that? What's that? So I
yeah,
want to tell you that if you think of reaching out to Indian schools, there's a possibility that people who have heard that word before, and that would be a great way for you to start a conversation. Another
yeah,
thing that shone through in what you said was this. I don't want to use the word nationalism, but this love for one's own culture and trying to keep that culture, protect, preserve, and perhaps strengthen that culture within children and within schools. Is my understanding correct? Or
yes, yes,
okay,
very correct.
and that's beautiful because in India is an extremely multicultural country. I'm not sure if you came to India before, but every
No,
hundred every 100 kilometers there's different food, different language, different culture. Every 100 kilometers. We have
yes,
27 national languages. 27
yes, yeah, wow.
national
It's,
languages. And when you
yeah,
enter into a classroom, if you have 40 kids or 50 students in a classroom, you probably have 90 languages among them.
wow, yes, yes, yeah, no, it's quite different. I mean, we definitely have lots of different cultures here, but Māori were here first before the English came and settled here, and so that's respected. And it's a huge amount of respect placed towards our bicultural nation.
I think it's a great lesson for us to have to be able to get our children to really love and respect their own culture, first through awareness and knowledge. And I think when they learn about their culture, it probably helps them build an identity. And what do you think? Being an early years expert,
Yeah,
how do
yeah,
you think all this plays,
definitely.
into that?
Yeah, I talk about it from first-hand experience, I guess. I didn't grow up in New Zealand. I grew up in Papua New Guinea, which is a third world country, so very, very different to New Zealand. And I went there when I was 3 months old, and my parents brought me back when I was 8 years old. And so those really informative years, we have neuro neuropsychologist here that discusses the first 1,000 days of a child's life as the most influential. And you'll find that I was brought back here. I looked like everybody else. I was placed in school, and I felt I don't belong here. This is not where I belong because this is not what I know as such. And so to have that feeling yourself, to then be a teacher to recognize that and younger children, it's so important that our children, not just our Māori children, but we have lots of Pacific Island children from all the different islands that live here. We also have a framework that supports them too. And we're also expected to teach to every child's culture. You're expected to learn about other people's culture. You're expected to bring the family and the community into your preschool to support that child to be successful in their own culture. Um, Something else I've seen is that my son, he had a really good friend and he was quite shy and reserved. They were in high school and he is Samoan, from Samoa, and that's one of our Pacific Islands. And when his mum put him in, there was a special festival called Polyfest that celebrates all those Pacific Island cultures. You know, they go and they sing and they dance and they do their hakas. And when she put him in there, he totally changed. His whole confidence changed. And so it doesn't matter sort of what age that it happens, as long as it happens. Obviously better off in the early years. Everything is better in the early years because, as we say, we're not growing the child. You know, if it's a boy, we're growing the man. So
Oh,
yeah. So,
wow. Wow. Ria, any, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, pardon the disturbance because I'm sitting amongst with nature actually. I do have a question for you since we're talking about the culture. So both our countries have rich cultural traditions that shape early years. So could you share how cultural values influences your approach towards early learning and what ideas you might have for incorporating similar values here in India?
yeah. So the first is that you learn about that culture. It's your job as a teacher to learn. If you don't know, learn. AI is fantastic at helping us. Obviously, the first relationship is relationship based, asking those parents information. A lot of the time in our early years, we have cultural days. So we celebrate those days. We have Waitangi Day in New Zealand. That's a public holiday. And every preschool is expected to celebrate that. A lot of the time preschools will write a treaty because that's what happened on Waitangi Day here. They had a
Oh,
treaty, and so they will write a classroom treaty based on the simple, very simple rules and very positive rules that they have for their classroom. And then everybody sort of signs the treaty. So they have that sense of this is our place and this is what we do here and this is what's expected here. Um, we celebrate Lunar New Year here, which is the Chinese New Year, and so we will get parents to come in and help. We learn about our red envelopes and putting our gold coins in them. We make dumplings, so we celebrate all parts. We bring music in, we bring dance in, we bring dress in, we bring food in. So yeah, when you think about the sort of any kind of way you're going to research a culture and you learn about it, that's how you incorporate it into your preschool at preschool level.
so so what is preschool? When you say early years, one of the question is how early is early years? And I realize the first 1,000 days, children are not in school, I'm assuming. So
Yes, they are.
you
Some in New Zealand, some are.
so
So
what's the age that they get into preschool? What is the definition of preschool over there? And are there formal and non-formal preschools? I don't know. I'm using terminologies from India. Like sometimes kids just go to somebody's house. Uh,
yes.
and oh, okay. And how many years is preschool? Like in India, we have nursery, junior, senior. Correct, Ria? I think from the age of 3.5. Well, would you just give the ages so that?
Yeah, that's right. So just before nursery, when the child is about 2.5, they have play school, and then at 3 or 3.5, they're in nursery, and then 4.5 in junior KG and 5.5 senior KG. So how is the age like in New Zealand?
So in New Zealand, we have private centres and also home based centres where children are allowed to go from the age of about 3 months old up until 6. Once they're 6, you have to decide if they're going to school or if you're going to homeschool them. We also have kindergartens here, so that's a public kindy, and children they're usually about 3 years old, so from 3 till 6. We also have play centres here where it's parent led, so it's a preschool, and the parents go in and they run it and they operate it, but it still has to fit within the framework as such. So the parents are the first teachers. So we have, kind of differing ages, but when I say preschool, it's early years as such as 0 to 6. Yeah.
And one thing that really struck out to me was every parent having a choice to either go to formal school or to homeschool, because in India, by law, every child has to go to school because of the Right to Education enactment, which was enacted in 2009. Every child needs to go into school. That's incredible. So is homeschooling legal in New Zealand?
Yes.
Obviously, I think it is. And
Yes,
how
but
does it look like? What's
you do
the
have to register. You can't just say I'm homeschooling my child and not do anything. It's a framework, and they have to follow the New Zealand curriculum, and that operates. I guess in New Zealand, it's a bit more holistic as such. It's not quite so structured. We have things called forest schools, where children 1 day a week, they'll attend school 4 days a week, and 1 day a week they're out in the forest learning about all sorts of things nature wise. They're still learning about literacy and numeracy and stuff, but it's not in a structured setting. And so I guess, especially with our early years, it's very child led, it's play based, and it's holistic learning as such. And it's that holistic approach. They talk about the children's physical, their social, emotional, cognitive, and their spiritual dimensions. So in those early years, it's not structured, it's not formal, sit down, listen, we're going to learn about our ABCs, we're going to write 1, 2, 3s. It's all very child led. So children show a huge interest in, let's say, trains, for example, and then you can teach that child about literacy and numeracy through their interest. It's also, I've lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah. It's also, we also focus on dispositions as well. So things,
juxtapositions?
sorry.
Did I hear juxtapositions?
No, dispositions.
Disposition.
There's a huge focus at the moment on social emotional competence within early childhood and building resilience. And so a lot of our planning will go into seeing things like that with children. There's not a huge focus on whether they know their numbers or whether they know their letters. They believe in New Zealand that children are not ready to learn about that until they go to school. They believe that these are the most important years to be able to learn things like resilience. So when they do go to school in a more structured environment where they're learning about literacy and numeracy, when they're out on the playground and things happen, children are a lot more capable of being resilient and being able to keep trying. An example was I was teaching at a preschool the other day, and we were teaching intentional teaching. And one of the preschool teachers there was working with a child they just started to learn how to use the monkey bars. And so that in itself is a huge learning opportunity. It's you're failing and you're failing and you're failing again, and you have to keep trying and keep going to be able to feel successful. And then once they finally do that, the sense of accomplishment it's all theirs. We support independence and agency within children too. So once they do accomplish those things, it's their accomplishment. It's not ours. It doesn't belong to the teacher.
Ria, from what I heard, I just want to, from what I heard, it appears that what you're teaching children in New Zealand is how to manage themselves in the world at what the world throws at them.
Correct.
That's something that I'm kind of getting, and I'm also feeling like the competency required to be a pre-primary or a early years teacher is incredibly high, because it's also about them being able to manage themselves and their own emotions, and then to be able to teach children in an articulate way, in a way that children are able to understand about how to develop those same competencies. And um, I think that's very different from here in India, because from what I see, I'm not speaking for India, but from my experience of preschool, I've seen that they spend 3 hours or 4 hours in school. They're learning the alphabet, they're learning numeracy, they're learning literacy. It's pretty, you know, that it's pretty. There's a drill,
Yes.
they got to get it in, and then they
Yeah.
go out and play. And most play is free time, free play. Just do your thing, and if you fall or if you get hurt, then um, um, take care of it yourself.
Yeah.
So sometimes I feel like, is what would be a better way to develop resilience? Like, does letting a child be on his own and figuring things out on his own
Yeah.
and hoping the environment teaches the child resilience, or can it be done in a kind of faster, more effective way? From
Yeah, I think we used to teach a bit more structured like that with literacy and numeracy, and you sit down and have mat times. And however, that's when they brought out Te Whāriki, which was in 1996, so it's quite an old framework already. And there's a lot of learning based on mental health in New Zealand. There's a huge amount of learning, and so if you saw a child hurt itself in the playground in New Zealand and you didn't, as a teacher, go and help them, you can be in a lot of trouble, some serious trouble. We have very tight child protection laws, which is also part of our social competence policies. And so something that we would do, obviously we have 2-year-olds, they're very emotional, as we know. um, it's our job to support them with their emotions. So we would sit beside them. If they allow you, you can touch them and rub their back, and you talk through what they're feeling. They don't know what they're feeling. They just know they feel awful. They're crying and they don't know, and they're not actually able, from all the research that we've learned, they're not able to calm themselves down. The cortisol within their body peaks. It goes up and up and up, and so that hormone is extremely, extremely bad for children. And so it's our job to, it's not like gentle and just letting them get their own way. If something has happened, a 2-year-old, I have a 2-year-old grandbaby, and so, he might want to eat a whole bag of lollies or something, which is not appropriate. So, he's, but he's going up. And so it's our job to be beside him and say, I know, and you empathize. I understand you really want those lollies. So you're giving him the language. And mum has said no. And what do you think we could do to make you feel better? Sometimes they're not in that. Sometimes you just have to be there with them and just say, you're so sad. You give them names for their feelings so they understand what's happening to them. And so in New Zealand, they look at every single part of the day as a teachable learning moment for children and teachers alike. So, yeah, in New Zealand, if we saw children hurt themselves and you just leave them and they're crying and you hope, from what we've learned, that child's getting traumatized. And so it's affecting them later on in life when they're an adult. They're not able to deal with their emotions. They're not able to deal with their feelings when things like that happen because they've never learned. Nobody has ever taught them. So yeah, quite different. Yeah,
Yes,
that's yeah, and
that's really
it's all based on it's all based on Te Whāriki, our framework. Te Whāriki in Māori means woven mat, and so if you picture a woven mat, they believe that a child doesn't just learn one way, and so they have principles of empowerment, holistic development, family and community, and relationships, and so you bring all those together as well as the focus of the curriculum emphasizes well-being, belonging, contribution, communication, and exploration. And so they expect you to be teaching to all of those things. So yeah, it's quite different.
and are these competencies and domains are these tested, or we leave the testing to later? And what
It's the
exactly is tested? Mhm.
Sorry. The children are not tested. The teachers, as such, are tested. So we have the Education Review Office comes about once every 3 years, between 2 to 3 years, to assess your preschool. We have a very stringent compliance around our preschools, extremely black and white, strict health and safety. Sleep rooms have to be a certain temperature. Babies have to be placed to bed a certain way. There's a lot of rules. We have over 300 regulations that we have to abide by, and so they're very strict in that approach. And so they will come and they assess your compliance first and make sure that you are compliant, which is a base level. Once you pass that base level, they then look at your teaching practice. They look at how you plan for children, because it all has to be recorded. They also look at, so you also, part of the planning is learning stories. You have to be writing learning stories. You have to show a continuity of learning throughout that stories, throughout the months. And so you can show that the child is gaining that knowledge as such. And so the children are never ever tested. It's always looked at the teacher and how we can be doing it better as such, and what we could be doing more, what more we should be learning if it's not happening within your preschool.
What tells, what stands out for me from what I just heard is that don't test the child, test the teacher, because we also trust the teacher, that if the teacher knows, she will deliver it. If the teacher doesn't know, there's no way that we should even be testing the child, because it seems unfair for us to test a child if the source of knowledge for that child, the teacher, doesn't have that knowledge itself. And that's literally the first time I've heard that.
Yeah.
And because yeah, I'm not And just to
Yeah.
expand on that question, it's like if the teachers have already a lot of training beforehand, then if you could also shed some light on what are they trained on, and once they join a school or a preschool, is there any in-service training? And if there is, how many hours is it? How many days is it? What does it look like? Frequency, things like anything that if a preschool or a school is listening to us, then they get an idea of, oh, okay, am I doing, just for them to get some
Yeah.
sort of benchmarks.
Yeah, so in New Zealand, you have what's called your teacher registration. So once you become qualified, you have to do 3 years and you receive a level 7 Bachelor of Teaching degree. Once you receive that, you then have 2 years of, it's called provisional registration. So it's like you're still a training teacher. And during that time, you're expected to do professional development. Your preschool should be supporting you in ways to find correct professional development. They'll look at maybe areas of your weakness and they'll find courses and that kind of thing to put you on. Then once you've passed that, you also, part of passing that is that you also have to be learning, like I say, about our bicultural curriculum. So you have to learn to speak Te Reo Māori. You need to have basic Te Reo Māori that you use in your classroom every day with children, and that's also part of being signed off from your teacher registration. Once you've passed that, you go to full teacher registration, and the same process happens non-stop. So it's every 3 years you go back and you still have to be signed off. And so in New Zealand, as a teacher, you've never ever learned everything. Like, I've been teaching for 30 years and there's still tons, absolutely tons for me to learn, because there's just, everybody has different strengths and stuff. I think intentional teaching, to answer your question as well, Ria, it would be one of the very first places I would start with preschools over there. And that's that kind of looking at what that child's interested in. You make an observation, you should sit for a week or two and observe your children to be able to watch what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. And we don't always concentrate on their weaknesses. Sometimes we concentrate on their strengths, and we want to bring that out further in them as well. Everything is quite positive in New Zealand. You're not supposed to use negative language. Example, when we write our treaty for our preschool, we don't say no running inside. We say walking feet inside. And so everything is a play on words. So that child is hearing, instead of what they shouldn't do, that child should always hear what they should do, always, at all times. And so you'll find when you use words like don't do that, stop, those types of things, it's not as effective. Children won't listen. Instead of you stopping, coming over to them quietly and saying, hey, I saw that you were running inside. Did you forget the rules? Remember, it's walking feet inside. Do you need to run? And they're like, yeah, we need to run. Awesome. You take those running feet outside and you can run outside as much as you want in the playground. And so and so then also with your intentional teaching, we have what's called ILPs. So those are individual learning plans. So in New Zealand, you are to plan specifically for each child in your class. So you don't have one overarching, we're going to be learning about transport this month. It's, David's learning about how to build resilience because he's learning the monkey bars. June is learning about dance and drama because she absolutely loves it, and her family's really into movement and dance and drama. One of our other children is learning about they can't put themselves in group play. They're okay one-on-one, but when they try to engage in group play, they're not socially acceptable ways. And so that is what we talk about when it's intentional teaching. And then so this all has to be formalized, written up in a plan. Once you've done that, once you've done your observations, you then have to connect it to the learning outcomes from Te Whāriki. And so Te Whāriki have learning outcomes. You need to find the most appropriate learning outcomes from that. You need to have the family's input into that plan as well, and what they think. You need their perspective and what they want to be working on with their child as well. And then once you've done that, it's up to you to come up with some intentional teaching ideas of how you're going to accomplish that. Once you do that, you then write a learning story, which is, in your learning story, you describe what's happened, you describe the learning that's happened, and then you discuss those learning outcomes, and you also discuss where you're going to take that learning next. How are you going to follow that up with what type of next activity? And then at the very end of it, you evaluate the whole thing. You discuss, were you successful with those learning outcomes? When you're evaluating, you're to evaluate your own teaching strategies within that evaluation and whether they were successful or not. And then you drop down and then it carries on. And so that's kind of the way we plan in New Zealand.
It appears that the school is designed around each child,
Yes.
as opposed to a one-to-many sort of model. And I think that is a key difference. The ILP is I think one of the key differences. And also it appears that a lot of parental ideas are taken in, like, what do you want for your for your children, which I think, again, is very powerful, because not every place or every country might have that. Parents may not have that much say, which I think is something to look at. One question I have was, uh, from what I'm hearing, it just feels that early years in preschool is doing so well, at least from a design perspective, in New Zealand. How much, or what do parents have to do, if they have to do anything at home, to support this? Because it looks like, you're getting everything. Is there anything that you feel that parents need to do at home with their kids? Um,
Yeah, there's
even
no
if system is
sorry.
okay. Even if school is so designed so well.
Yeah, there's no formal requirements for parents to do anything at all in New Zealand. We definitely encourage it. We encourage that we will have parent nights where we bring parents in and teach them some of the learning, what that looks like in your center. Sometimes parents say, well, what have they been doing? They're just playing all day. And so sometimes when we have parents like that, that's a great opportunity for us to have a parent night and to bring them in and teach them, look, when you're playing with water, these are all the things that your child is learning. They're learning about numeracy. They're learning about science concepts. There's so much learning that's happening within that play, and it's just because it's not formalized or what they're used to. So yeah, we definitely our children that are most successful are the ones where the parents are really engaged and are following up on those types of things at home, reading to their children every night before bed, sitting around the table and eating with them and talking to them rather than watching TV. New Zealand is not big on screens, especially in the early childhood years. That's a huge no-no as such. We're there to teach rather than to be putting them in front of screens. Screens have their place. I grew up watching cartoons on the weekend, etc. But it's very much about balance. And so if your children are in preschool all day, sometimes, from some of our centres are open from 7 in the morning till 6 at night, and sometimes there's children in there 5 days a week during those hours, at that really young and formative age. And so screens are very much frowned upon. Yeah.
So you don't have that much of a screen addiction problem like the way maybe other countries, especially developing countries, have?
No, I think New Zealand is aware of it. Yeah, not to say that we don't have families that, that children have been on screens, but you can tell the ones that have, I guess. So they stand out compared to the other children. Example, I was working in a preschool yesterday and there was a child that was really lacking motor skills. He was off balance when he was walking. When he was climbing, he couldn't climb. He could only hold the two and maybe put one foot up, which was really behind for his age. He was almost 3. And then the preschool teacher said to me that he had grown up until now in front of a screen. And so therefore, if they're not exposed to those types of things like climbing, running, balancing, they don't learn it. Their muscles don't learn it. You need muscle memory. That's how, yeah. So a lot of our education is physical. They do a lot of physical stuff. You're expected. So our preschools most of the time have the doors open. The children choose whether they're inside or outside for learning. And a lot of them prefer to be outside and moving. We provide things for them to make sure that they are able to hang. Hanging is such an important skill, to be able to learn to hang, to pull yourself up, because you're strengthening all the muscles in your hands. And so in New Zealand, you can't hold a pen and write with it if you haven't been able to strengthen the muscles within your hands first. And so it's understanding that all of it is part of their learning rather than us sitting down. If we're in front of a screen and you're just swiping, you're not going to develop those skills as such. And primary school teachers are seeing those children come through, the ones that haven't been able to hang and haven't been able to jump from things. New Zealand promote risk taking as well, so it's really, really important that children learn how to risk take safely. And so putting mats out and encouraging children to jump from things and land while still making sure that they're safe as such. But yeah, so we have big boxes that are sort of 2 meters high, and the children will learn to climb up the top of those, have to learn how to climb down the other side. And so all of that is also a huge part of their learning.
Yeah, this is, yeah, go on, Ria.
Yeah, they have them in primary school and college, not in early childhood, no.
I also think from what I understood, the essence was maybe screen is not really creating problems for children. It is all the different activities that children would have done if they were not sitting in front of the screen that
Yes,
they are
correct.
not able to do now. That is kind of delaying their development, which is so true, right? It was so true. I mean, um, uh, evolution says you don't use it, you lose it. So I think
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And it's also very easy to put a screen in front of a child. They're busy, they're quiet. It's a
and,
lot easier for the parent or the teacher,
and,
because, as we know, you can develop addictions to screen time,
and,
where you try and take that screen away, and there's huge problems.
and
So New Zealand's quite aware of those things, and so yeah, that's why it's very much frowned upon. We believe that children will be exposed to screens enough at home and in their own time. They don't need it during those early years.
that's wonderful. If we are running an early years school, what do you think are some of the policies, if you have to name them, that these schools need to have, whether or not it is a regulation, whether or not the country that our listeners are listening from, whether it's a regulation there or not? What are some good to haves? And are there any websites? Is it open source? Is there anywhere that we could go to take a look and read and
Yeah, definitely. You can definitely look at the early childhood regulations. The New Zealand early childhood regulations are what all our policies are based on. And yeah, there's definite policies that are required. Sleep policies, like I've mentioned earlier, are really important. At one point in New Zealand, we had the highest cot death rate in the world, sudden infant death syndrome. And so when you have babies in your centre, you have to place them a certain way. They have to be facing on their back. They have to be at the end of the bed with their feet touching. It's also the blankets don't go over their face. They have to be in a safe space. You have to be able to. So we've got nappy change policies. So if you're going to be changing a baby's nappy, there's policies on that, which is highly important, in regards to infectious diseases and keeping ourselves safe. They escalated during COVID time, as you could imagine. Part of that's health and safety. I know one part of our nappy change policy is it states that you're never to take your hand off that child. So you need to make sure you have everything there so you don't ever just turn and in a split second they've fallen off. And it does happen. And then that's when you're reminded if anything does go wrong in your centre, that's when full training happens again. You go back through that policy, you discuss it, how could it be avoided next time, all of that sort of thing. We have a social competence policy, which is based around how our children talk to each other, how the teachers are interacting with them. And if you're in breach of that, that can be a really serious breach as such. We have health and safety policies in regards to fall spaces. So if you're placing furniture, that outside furniture for children to jump off, etc., if you're placing that, it needs to be 1.5 meters away from everything else. And so it's all very, very strict, and it's not unnecessary. It's all come from accidents, and it's come from these things have happened. And so this is why they've brought in regs. And we also have what's called the licensing criteria here. So not only do we have the regulations, we have the New Zealand licensing criteria, which the Ministry of Education write. They change that regularly. And so something will happen in a centre, they will then change that. You need to be on top of that. And then you also need to change your policy to match the changes. And then you have to train your staff on what those changes are as such. So it's a constant. Compliance is huge in New Zealand. Our teachers are a little bit burnt out by it. Yes. They're quite vocal on our ECE pages on Facebook and stuff about how burnt out they are. We have accident forms, which are very intense. Where were you? Where was the child? Why did it happen? Who dealt with the accident? Who signed off on the accident? What was the treatment? You can't work in an ECE centre. You need to be first aid trained as well. That's also part of it too. And you also have to have child protection training as well. And so that's every 2 to 3 years that you have to constantly renew that. We have a choking policy. We have policies for everything.
So you have this online, and it's probably open source for us to go through.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I can send you a link for it.
Okay. And that would be great. Then I can put it, in the description so that people can take a look. And are you happy helping schools across India if they reach out to you to take sessions online, maybe on Zoom or something like that? Because so much of this is, I think, to a certain extent, just a matter of knowing that, oh, this is something that I could do, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first step when you say that, when I think about if schools are going to implement these changes within them, because India is such a different culture to New Zealand, you should definitely discuss it with your parents first, because they're not going to understand as such. It's quite different. And so definitely bringing them into your centre, explaining why you're doing these things, and so they get that understanding. Whereas you might find similar, why is my child just playing all day and why don't they know their numbers? We don't want that.
Parents are the same everywhere. I think, when they see a child playing, the natural response is they're probably not studying, right?
Yes, yep. Parents are like that. They feel good when their child knows their numbers and when they know their letters. But in New Zealand, we've learned that's actually just rote learning is what it's called, and so that's just memory, and so that can also just be lost as such. Whereas what we're teaching them is it's embedded within them as such, and as they grow up, to learn whatever they want to do, it's then that's that time for that sort of structured rote learning where they're learning to read and write and that type of thing. So yeah.
So in this kind of context, like what's the perspective or view on AI in education, especially for early years? Because already the context seems to feel like it's ring fenced and more focused and concentrated around ensuring children are able to grow like they were designed to grow, like in the forest, walking around with people, developing connections, creating bonds, developing the socio-emotional capacities that are required for them to be able to live a very happy, fulfilling, meaningful life. So suddenly, like what's the view of your personal view, as well as if you've been privy to the view of the government or the Department of Education or anything? I mean, that could just be an opinion about AI in early years, because the AI is like the probably the biggest hype or the biggest news that has come
Yeah.
out last 1 year? Yeah.
So I guess my story, I love AI, passionate about it. Um, After COVID here, we have huge teacher shortages. Lots of our senior teachers left. Lots returned back overseas and never came back. And so what we're finding is that a lot of teachers are coming out of these institutions. They're fully qualified. They're ready to go into a preschool with all these expectations that I've just listed, but they don't have any mentor teachers there to be teaching them, and so they're fumbling and they're trying to find their way, and so we have a lot of burnout amongst our teachers. They're really, really tired. They're searching for answers. The reason I loved AI was when I would go in consulting and was trying to help these centres, I felt like there wasn't enough of me to go around as such. And so that's when I discovered AI. I just thought, wow, this is just fantastic. So I don't believe yet, I'm not sure at the moment, but currently I don't believe it should be used with children. I think there might be a place where it gets to that, especially around creativity and that type of thing, especially if you're working with the child, not just leaving them to it. But AI for me is based around those teachers. So definitely reducing administrative roles. Example, when I talk about the ILPs,
Yeah.
so to be able to put that as a prompt into AI and say, okay, this is the information. Obviously, we need to keep everything as private as possible, no names, etc. But you put all of that in and you say, can you give me 5 intentional teaching activities that would support this? And it gives it to you like that. At the moment, teachers are spending 1 to 2 hours going, gosh, I'm kind of frozen. I've just worked 5 hours out in the center with the children. My brain's kind of working, and it's like it prompts you, and then you're like, oh, of course. Oh, yeah, I forgot about those activities as such. You find the best ones, and then you sort of go with that. AI is okay at writing learning stories. A lot of teachers in New Zealand don't want it for that. They believe that learning stories are very personal, and so they want to hold that as such. And the ones so far that I've seen, they're not that great. But it's absolutely beautiful for planning, beautiful for newsletters, to be able to pop in, hey, I need to write a newsletter for our parents. These are the things I want to focus on. That takes you 5 to 10 minutes compared to, again, an hour to 2 hours. So it's a huge time-saving tool. You could have it for reports. So when I say learning stories, if you're in primary school, the same thing, generating reports for your children. Another great way is behavior tracking and reporting. And so if you've got children in your classroom, maybe they might be violent. A lot of the time we have 2-year-olds that bite because they don't have the language, and so they're frustrated. You can track that behavior with AI tools and be able to see the patterns within it, so you can start eliminating it. And so it's helping you to problem solve, realistically, is what I love it for. You can put observations in there. It will pull out things that you might not have seen. Example, when I put into it, give me 2 learning outcomes from Te Whāriki that matches what I'm saying. And I was like, no, that's not right, because as we know, AI hallucinates. And so it's our job to constantly test it and make sure that it is doing what it's supposed to. So we still need our teacher knowledge because it is making mistakes. Then when I said to it, no, that's not quite right. Please explain how you've come up with that. Then when it explained how it came up with that, I learned something new. And I was like, I've never looked at it or thought about that like that before. And so that's kind of why I love AI within teaching. It's not so much about the children. It's about helping our burnt out teachers to be able to look at their teaching, look deeper within their teaching, and obviously all those admin tasks. It's going to speed it up a lot more. Teachers in New Zealand are screaming that They want to spend time with the children. They didn't get into teaching to be doing all this paperwork. They trained to be teachers because they love children and they want to be with the children teaching them. And so that's why I believe that this dropped at exactly the right time for us. New Zealand's been really, really conservative about adopting it here. Very conservative. A year ago, nobody would talk about it here at all. I have friends that work at the Ministry of Education who said, nope, don't even want to talk about it. Absolutely shut that down. It is changing. What I did see, though, was that teachers, because of that, teachers were using it in secret. We have teachers here from China, that kind of thing. And so when I broached it with them, they were like, yeah, yeah, like the guilt on their face. And I'm like, I'm not here to tell you off. I'm interested to see what you're using it for and what you do it with. And so that was also scary because a lot of our teachers, even now, are using it and they're using it secretively. And so they don't know about it. And that's what I do. I go in and I train on that AI literacy. I train, what you should be doing with it, what you shouldn't be doing with it, what it's capable of. And so, yeah, I left my job to do this because I believed in it. So I was a consultant and I ended up quitting my job because, again, my boss was like, no way, the risk is way too big. I can't risk my company as such. Reputation is everything. And she didn't believe in AI, but I've learned so far now that I'm a visionary. So that's a new word, a new thing for me. And I just couldn't let it go because I just deep down knew that this is here to help us as such. It's not going away. Now I've been interacting with global education and AI people. I can see that it's actually everywhere and that New Zealand is just very, very conservative to be using it. It's starting to teach. The Early Childhood Council is offering a course next month. This is the first time they've even spoken about it. So that's kind of the level of how slow it was when I was talking to somebody in the EU and she was saying that if you haven't done my course, as in like what they have over there, people teaching AI literacy, you can actually be fined within your school because they take it so seriously that you need to be trained how to use it appropriately. And it's definitely, you need a policy around it. But as she was saying, a policy is not enough. You need to know how to work it as such. So, yeah.
That was such a beautiful outlay of how AI is playing in with different nations and the fears it has, and also where it really comes in to help, especially in a post-COVID time when you had teacher shortages and maybe when teacher training took a beating. And
Yeah.
the way you highlighted that the new teachers are not finding mentor teachers, those
No.
very same teachers who would help continue and further the knowledge that these young teachers have, and now getting access to AI. I think if the heart is in the right place and, as you said, intentional teaching, then using AI to prompt you, I think that was phenomenal. I've never heard that before. Apart from all the new things I learned today, that is something that, I will probably use first and use the most, saying that get AI to prompt you.
Yeah, definitely.
Making it a partner in your thought process, and also understanding the place that it has in your space, and knowing that you have to be intentional and you have to have teacher knowledge, as you said, and then really staying on top of it. I think that is really really powerful. And knowing that there are other countries in the world that, in some cases, mandating AI literacy for teachers, versus other countries who are taking their time to understand it better and deeper, to contextualize it, is also powerful, because in some other countries who may be just waiting, teachers need to probably take initiative and build the agency to learn it on their own. Because I was looking at some research very briefly, and it said that I think only 36% or 46%, I think, of teachers have used a little bit of AI or know about it, heard about AI in the US, but almost double the number of high school students in terms of percentage are
Yes.
using it.
Yes,
You
yes,
know,
exactly.
so if
Yeah,
students
that's
are
what we're
using,
going to see here as well. If we're not trained in it and you don't know how to use it, then how are you going to be able to teach the children? If you don't have that knowledge, you need to, we do partner alongside our children and learn with them. But if they're ahead of you, it's probably not that great.
it's like I think it's called the Peter principle in reading, if I'm not mistaken. You cannot give what you don't have. And so
Mm,
teachers, from everything I heard in the first half of our conversation, there was so much about building the competency of teachers, building the perspective of teachers, and then trusting that the teachers are going to deliver, it to children because they're teachers. They care about this job. No one's forced them to become teachers. And it's not an easy job also, right? It's something
no.
that it's
It's
something
not the
that
best paying job either. They didn't
it's
get in it for the pay.
it's hard, it's tough, and it's not paying. So it's only a
Yeah.
certain kind of people who would get attracted to that. People who have a certain purpose in life, and they're in pursuit of that. So I think that is very powerful for us to think in terms of this is like a computer revolution, like what happened in the 80s or 90s in India when
Yeah.
computers came in. This is not just another software, this is not
No.
just another website. This seems to be, this is definitely a revolution. And you taking the time and the courage to, you taking the time and the courage to be able to uh, leave your consultant role and get out there.
Scary.
Yeah, I know. But really, I appreciate what you're doing because when you look back a couple of years later, you will notice that you would have really changed the lives of so many teachers who were probably struggling and would probably take a lot more time to get better. I think for schools in India, where every teacher may not have the same level of competency or time to develop individual education plans for their children, also because it's not a requirement according
Yeah.
to the current regulations. So in that sense, teachers who want to go the extra mile, or who want to use the amount of time that they have to be able to do more and to do better with their children, can now use AI for the
Mm.
individual lesson planning, I think, which is very powerful. And I think if you draw a value chain, it is only teachers with the most experience, most competency, most understanding of children will be able to develop effective individual learning plans, which now means that unless you have a teacher with that kind of experience, depth, breadth of knowledge, won't be able to do that. And so
Yeah.
sometimes kids just don't have access to that. So with
No.
AI, I think more kids can get access to a little more than what's already happening, no?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the reason they did the individual learning plans as well is because you will find children in your class who are quieter, or and those are always the children that get left behind as well.
Mm.
And so it's about seeing every child, and as teachers, we all want to be able to do that. You don't want to leave certain children behind because they're difficult, or because they're quiet and shy and they don't stand out within the classroom and such. And so by making it compulsory as such, that's where we have seeing every single child. Our children nowadays here have so much self confidence. They'll tell you exactly what they're thinking. So
Well,
yeah, there's been a huge shift, definitely,
mm.
in
Well,
education.
it's been such a wonderful conversation with you, Tanya. I really am grateful for you taking the time out, especially after a whole day. And I'm sure you had a busy and productive day, but thank you for taking the time out and having this conversation. I think the conversation flowed in a way that allows a lot of teachers and principals and school leaders in India really see that teacher knowledge and teacher competency and human knowledge is so important. And
Yes.
then on top of that, when we're using AI, there's a time and place for that. So while I say I do AI in education training, I just like you, I want to focus and amplify the amount of importance that your own knowledge and education, will come through, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think in New Zealand and maybe around the world, teachers are scared that AI will replace them as
Right.
such. Well, I think lots of industries are scared of that, not just education, but after using it, I mean, I've been using it a lot less than everyone globally. So for about a year and a half, I can see that it's never going to replace my brain and my knowledge, my experiences. It's like you say, it's totally going to change everything. You know, people talk about, it's just a tool. It's like a calculator to do maths, but it's not. It's literally like what you've stated. It's like having the World Wide Web. Things are going to change, being able to use it. But we didn't all lose our jobs because of it, but we are going to have to adapt to be able to use it efficiently and stuff. So it's never going to take away what we have, which is our knowledge as such. Yeah, because it's only trained off the internet as such. So
Yeah. Is there
yeah.
anything you'd like to lay out and share, if I may not have touched, and if there's something that you feel like you want to bring out?
I think you touched on it before when you said that AI had taught me something. AI has taught me lots, absolutely huge amounts of stuff. It picks up on, I guess, when you're writing to it and the words that you're using, it's picking up on your subconscious as such. And so it reflects that back to you. So if you say to AI after using it for a while, tell me something about myself that I might not know, that's a great prompt. And you're like, oh, oh gosh. It's really, really true when you start to unpack it. Yeah, I think AI is definitely here to be used as a partner. You're going to be leading the learning and the learning journey, but not being afraid of being able to say to it, what aren't I thinking of right now? AI is our problem solver. I love problem solving. It's my favorite thing. And AI is the best problem solver. So with my brain that loves problem solving, and then I'm constantly interacting with many different AIs, I guess. And so to ask it, what haven't I thought of? What could I do better? Those types of questions are really, really good. It's honest as it comes back and it says, well, it's always positive. Well, you're doing great at this, but you could think bigger, you could think wider. And then when it suggests things, that's when I'm like, oh my God, I never thought of that. And that's when I get my little buzz. I'm like, I'm so excited again. Yeah.
That is beautiful. I'm going to try using it that way. It's like, it's there was a story I remember saying that sometimes all you need is somebody to talk to you to prevent you from doing something bad. I don't want to use any words here, but
Yes,
I'm
I
sure.
understand.
Yeah. Sometimes it could be a phone that you get and you don't pick up, and maybe the person on the other end just needed to hear your voice. And, you know,
Yeah.
I don't want to say anything more.
Exactly.
I don't want to say
It's
anything more.
great for when you're touching on that, it's
Yeah.
great for our autistic people that don't understand the societal norms. And to ask it questions, give it an example of what's happened in your day and you don't understand why that's happened. It can help break it down. Why did that person make that face? Why did that person talk to me like that? And it's explaining it and from a non-judgmental point of view, because it's not a human, talking to another human, they bring their own perception on it, their own judgment on it, whereas AI can be non-biased as such. And yeah, I mean, there's so many fantastic things going on with it. I'll talk about it forever.
But brilliant! I learned so much, and I'm also going to amplify this a little bit. That parents of special children should explore the power of AI, just like you nudged just now.
Yeah.
I think that's really
Yeah,
powerful.
definitely. Yeah,
But
definitely.
this looks like a conversation that could go on for the next 2 hours,
It
and
will.
we still, I'm gonna, wish you all the best, and we probably may have more conversations about different topics, and I'm sure you're waiting to go back to your granddaughter, if
Yeah,
right? Is that right?
a boy.
No, your grandson, and yeah, that's the true test of all your life's work.
Yeah. Yes,
and
we're very proud of him.
and the only person, the only little man who doesn't want you to be a trainer or a teacher is your grandson, right?
Yeah.
So that's amazing. But thank you so much for having this conversation. And I look forward to receiving a couple of links that we can put in the description so that we can send off these things to our audiences, who are mostly school owners and school principals, school leaders across India, maybe about 3 to 4 thousand of them. So I really pray and hope that some of them get in touch with you and begin their own journey of transformation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Ria. Nice to virtually meet you.